morning to all of you. Next session will be based on zero trust implementation, examining role of PKI and authentication models. I would like to introduce myself first. I'm myself Kirti. I'm an alumni of Cybersecurity, which is a joint skill initiative by Microsoft and DSCI for skilling women in area of cybersecurity. So currently I'm working in productivity consulting and I do red teaming and cybersecurity audits. I would like to call out the speakers. Uh, Steve D'Souza, who is a moderator. Welcome, Steve. Vice President, Enterprise Risk Management and CISO, ICICI Lombard. Welcome. Rahul Pathak, Senior Product Manager, Device Trust. DigiCert. Welcome, Rahul. Yuvraj Pradhan, Director Solutions Engineering Asia Pacific and Japan. Sonic Wall. Then Neha Taneja, SGM and CISO, Hero Motorcorp. And Sushil, Mr. Sushil, Chief General Manager, BIS, GAIL India Limited. Welcome all of you for this session, and I would like to hand over the session to Steve D'Souza. Over to you, Steve. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel today and to have the opportunity to moderate the discussion with this esteemed panelists that we have today. Thank you so much, DSCI, for the opportunity. I'm sure each one of you in the audience will agree that it has never been a more challenging time to manage cyber risk and at the same time cater to the ever-evolving and challenging business landscape that we live in today, right? And probably all of this might have been spiked up in the last 2 or 3 years with COVID and obviously the work from home phenomena that we are seeing. Not only do we need to deal with humans today, obviously, right? Employees, non-employees, but also non-humans in the form of bots, devices, API integrations that we've been seeing in the ecosystem. That's on one side. Obviously, the adoption of cloud and the evolution of the same has had its own set of challenges. To add to that, what we've been seeing with generative AI over the last 1 year, correct? And you look at any predictions for 24, 25, you'll see generative AI mentioned over there, whether Gen AI for security, Gen AI for productivity, Gen AI for sustainability. All of this has brought in a lot of challenges overall for organizations. While all of this has happened, we've also seen security solutions that have equally been introduced, and one solution that we are talking about today is Zero Trust and PKI, which has added to overall security stack, right? And while it has been an interesting solution, it has its own sets of requirements in terms of how do you integrate with it. So let me begin with Yuvraj. How do you think Zero Trust has evolved over from the time it's been introduced, and what do you think are the challenges in adoption, adopting or implementing Zero Trust framework in the organization?
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I think you spoke about Gen AI, right? So I think because of generative AI, I think Zero Trust has got a breather. Because before that, I think Zero Trust was one of the most abused word in the security industry, right? Everybody's talking about Zero Trust. But coming back on a serious note, I think what we've seen in the last decade or so, Zero Trust has really materialized into something. Earlier it was more of a recommendation model, but I think now today it's one of the most common and comprehensive framework that is there to secure an organization, right? And the couple of triggers that we see in the past decade that has led to Zero Trust being one of those comprehensive frameworks. The first one is, I think, the non-stop amount of breaches that we see every day, right? Second, I think a pandemic happened and the way we do security really changed. So because of pandemic, we're seeing more and more organizations trying to adopt Zero Trust. Third one that we see, the third trigger that we see is that I don't know how many of you know about a couple of year back, CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, came up with a framework or a model called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. Before that, most of the zero trust initiatives has been more tactical in nature. But what CISA has done, it has given more of a very mature way of looking at the zero trust. Basically, they talk about 5 key pillars. The first one is around identity. The second one is around device. The third one is around network. The fourth one is around your applications and your workloads. And the fifth one is data. So when you're trying to look at zero trust, we got to look at how do you address each of those 5 different pillars, right? And the last one, which is made a trigger, is around, if you look at, especially from a US point of view, President Biden, about a year back, came up with an executive order, making it mandatory for all organizations to adopt zero trust. And they've given a deadline of 2024. So those are some of the triggers that has really led to zero trust. In terms of challenges, what we're seeing is that, especially after the pandemic, what we're seeing is that the perimeter has dissolved, right? There's no one single control point to really address security. So I think what has happened now with the pandemic is we've got hybrid work model where people are working from outside the network, the applications are outside the network in the cloud, data is everywhere, and then you've got workloads which comes up on and up and on again, right? So how do you really control security in all these different touch points is some of the challenges that we see.
Sure, you spoke about US. India is it's also done the same thing. You look at RBI, you look at IRDA, look at any regulation, they also have mandated zero trust. So Mr. Sushil, what has been your experience? What do you think are challenges of adopting zero trust in your industry?
One are the companies which are declared as the critical information infrastructure, other as the normal companies. Because the critical information infrastructure companies, the non-working of their IT infrastructure or the anything impact the other organizations also. So apart from my other colleague which I said, I have one point to say that in the zero trust, people has also very critical role in the role and importance, because in case an organization has kept the facility management team who is managing the infrastructure and the security solution, in case any particular person leaves the organization, then and he must be having certain usernames and other credentials. Those credentials should be immediately be changed, so that in the case of he should or she should not be able to misuse those credentials and passed on to the other persons. And second part I want to say is this zero trust, because in the public sector companies, we have to report all the incidents within the 6 hours to certain, and to NCIAPC and also to MHA. Though zero trust provisions are to be kept, and various technologies and the user awareness to the top management is to be kept regarding this. Apart from this, the CISO role is that he should apprise the board and other top management members about the criticality of the zero trust, so that the organization and the management put a lot of emphasis on the implementation of zero trust. That's all. Thank you.
How does Zero Trust and PKI complement each to, other to ensure secure authentication and authorization across diverse environments? And what should be the considerations that organizations should look for before they select and go ahead with the implementation journey?
Yeah. So Yuvraj was talking about how Zero Trust has evolved, over the years. And, the earlier notion was Zero Trust is related to network, right? But you see that Zero Trust is evolving to devices, users, apps, people. It's really covering a broader gamut of security rather than just network, right? And, enterprises today are facing the challenge to, manage hundreds of users, thousands of devices, right? So basically, a single compromised password can create a huge security breach, right? You look at the example of Okta, the Okta Help Center breach that happened a few days back, right, in December itself. That was because of a single password breach, right? So the first principle of Zero Trust is, never trust, always verify. And, PKI provides you a way to give that verified identity, right? And it's really covering three broad areas, right? The first area is around, providing authentication, using a secure identity, and you can make the whole authentication invisible, right? What you're essentially doing is taking the authentication away from the end user, and, you're giving it into the hands of IT by, automating the provisioning, of certificates, revocation, right, or renewing the certificates. The second thing is it establishes, data encryption, right? And thirdly, you are maintaining the data integrity, and, you are basically automating the whole life cycle of the identity. And, if you think about it, at any point in time, if an employee joins the organization, they have different identities depending on the time they join to when they change the roles or when they move out of the organization. So it's easier to manage that identity, and the same is across devices. Take an IoT scenario, right? A device may have a different identity, at birth, right, when it's coming from or it's getting manufactured, to, the time when you deploy an application, and that will need a different identity, So it's easier to manage that identity, in that whole Zero Trust model, and it really forms that foundation of implementing Zero Trust. Right? The second question around, what organizations need to do first is, ensure that it comes in from a trusted route, right? So your certificates always come from a trusted route. The second thing is you have a good mix of long-lived and short-lived certificates. And thirdly, make sure that there's always an inventory, of all the certificates, what kind of crypto you are using, right? And what are the kind of certificates that you have, and, what are, till when are all the certificates valid, right? So yeah, that's really a summary of how, PKI really forms the foundation of implementing the whole, Zero Trust.
Interesting thoughts. Sushil, Rahul covered the fundamentals, the principles, and what should organizations look for towards implementing Zero Trust, right? In your sector, in your organization, there's a lot of IT and OT. Your sector uses a lot of SCADA systems as well. How do you think it differs and varies when you're implementing Zero Trust or PKI in an organization like yours, which at the base of your entire operations? How do you approach for your OT systems?
In our organization, we are putting a lot of emphasis on the Zero Trust related architecture implementation. GAIL being a critical information infrastructure, because GAIL is supplying gas to multiple industries and organizations based on which their business runs. In case of any issue happen in our infrastructure, those company will be affected. So we have implemented baseline system in our SCADA system. Baseline system means how the particular SCADA system and various RTO and other things will work. That has been really defined. And in case of any deviation from those parameters and anything, automatically alerts come to our SCADA SOC. And then they see whether those changes are done by the concerned administrator or it is something else. In case it is done by the concerned administrator, then there is no issue, then it is a known thing. And in case there is something abnormal, then they immediately take into consideration and see what is the reason, and if some corrective action is required, that is to be done by them, and they carry out that. Second part is in the SCADA system is to supervisory control and data acquisition system. So in that system, we have implemented leak detection system in our pipeline, so that in case of any even minor leakage, it should be immediately brought to the knowledge of the concerned person, and so that they can immediately take corrective action and for the rectification of the pipeline, or in case of any solution, so that because gas is a very critical, and even small leak can lead to a major disaster of the fire and the blast of the pipe. So a leak detection system is implemented, and in case of even small leak, that is to be identified, and our central SCADA system is that all our pipeline across the India are monitored centrally from our central station. Another part is, apart from our own SOC being critical information infrastructure, our systems are also logs are going to the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, so, and they are also monitoring their logs. And in case of any abnormality observed by them, apart from our SOC, they also point out and suggest for the corrective action, and we analyze their observation, and if some corrective action is required, that is being done, so that our systems are protected. Apart from all this, even ministry and other statutory agencies are taking regular review, and we have to give presentation to our board on quarterly basis and tell whatever the issue is there, that has to be reported to them. This is about SCADA, and we have implemented state-of-the-art SWIFT related system, like the bank guarantee and other things are to be provided by the vendors to the organization in against their work order and all that. Earlier, those bank guarantees were to be provided in the manual mode, and once the bank guarantees were provided, then manually the organization send it to the concerned bank and get confirmation from them whether it is okay, and this bank guarantee is fine. Now we have implemented the SWIFT related infrastructure, and the bank guarantee say is provided online, and verification is also kept online. Say organization X, he is taking bank guarantee from bank Y, and GAIL is there. So the secure communication mentioning in the packet the address of the organization which is whom the bank guarantee is provided, and like our we are the customer, and the bank name, that packet comes to through the SWIFT channel, and it is being verified. If it is found to be okay, the organization confirms, send the okay signal, and then this whole process is completed within say 4-5 minutes, which earlier was taking 5-6 days and 10 days. And apart from this, I have one more suggestion regarding this. Sometime organizations think that, small organizations think that I will do the reverse auctioning and I will give this to some other third party, that you do reverse auctioning for them. But those organizations should take into consideration that even if you will give the reverse auctioning part to them, in case of any dispute coming of the leakage of the data or any misuse of data, the statutory agency will going to ask from you that what is the reason and all that. So whenever certain organization go for reverse auctioning and give it to third party, They should not blindly send it, throw it on to them. They should clearly know in case of any dispute coming out in the court and other things, they should get the required responses from them. Thank you.
Interesting thoughts, Sushil. Neha, you have been, with your vast experience, you've been across industries, right? From consulting, you worked for the oil and gas sector, and now in the automotive industry. And the automotive industry itself has gone through a complete evolution today. The use of IoT devices is very, very prevailing in the center of your operations, right? So, whether you talk about connected cars, functionalities like AISS, or for that matter, telematics, where other sectors also are dependent upon, how is the automotive sector going about implementing zero trust in an IoT kind of an environment?
Since you brought about few key elements of zero trust, I think when we talk of identity, we talk of applications. So now trying to draw a parallel with IoT, it is not a direct parallel which you can draw with IT. Within IT you talk about user identities, you talk about least privilege, but when you come to IoT clients and those devices, the context even changes in the kind of sector it is operating on. So if it's for healthcare, the context of IoT would be very different in terms of risk and impact than the context for automotive, or for that matter. And one of the inherent limitations, when we say fundamental of zero trust is identity, many of these devices are not directly linked to identities. You cannot establish identities directly. Then I think to Rahul's point about certification, certificates and PKI, the role of PKI, and those principles you cannot directly apply easily. If you even try to, the certificate lifecycle management, and then the next part of it, the kind of data which you create for telemetry, the kind of analytics you perform on it, if there are data privacy related implications to it, if that is compromised, how does it impact your entire supply chain? Again, with the supply chain getting more and more digital we know that there has been, the pandemic brought in a sea change with respect to digital adoption. So the implication of one a breach at one end, be it the IoT client, and how does it cascade to the entire supply chain is something you cannot really predict when we talk of specifically, use cases pertaining to IoT. And then, I think from Sushil's point, I'll come back to OT also. Yes, I was associated with oil and gas sector. Again, both OT and IoT, one parallel, these systems were initially not thought of, they were not designed in mind to be able to incorporate security tools or solutions as an overlay to them. And in OT, unfortunately, the cybersecurity element came in as a retrofitted approach, because OT directly connecting to internet or getting directly exposed was not a thought earlier. OT journey came in much later. So that is why with respect to OT, the availability and the safety considerations, every time you try to patch something, there is a huge cycle time. So you directly cannot implement all controls with the same amount of rigor. So IT SOC, your mean time to respond and detect will be comparatively very less compared to actionable on OT SOC, wherein the implication of OT SOC incident would be very high in terms of safety and availability.
That's very, very interesting. Dhruvraj, coming to you, Neha spoke about the entire concept of supply chain. Every sector, every organization has gone through some form of digitization today, right? And are dependent on third-party organizations for sustainable business. Whether you talk about the e-commerce industry or the others, you have some dependency, like a payment gateway, right? Without the payment gateway, you just cannot. And similarly, every industry would have some form of dependency on some other sector, some other supplier, some other ancillary, or so on. How do you think, in this context, organizations can adopt third-party integrations and collaboration securely within the overall framework of zero trust?
That's a very pertinent question, because today I think as you suggested, right, today's environment is very, very highly integrated, right? If you look at third-party reports such as Ponemon Institute, 35% of the breaches today are related to third-party contractors or third-party parties, right? So it's important for us to really look at how do we make sure that the third party that connects to our environment are secure. That's the first thing I think what we need to do is make sure, because they're connecting to your applications, right? So it's important for us to make sure that you don't give access to the entire network. You decouple the applications that they're trying to access to that network. So there are different technologies in terms of zero trust. You have something called the zero trust network access. Some even call it private access, which provide security to those applications. So what it does, it only allows that particular set of applications to access, right? And then again, following the principle of zero trust, you can do things like micro-segmentation and so on. So ultimately what is happening is the contractors are only allowed access to the set of applications. That is one. Second, I think it's important when you tie up with those third-party vendors, you have SLAs in place which talks about secure by design, secure by default, making sure that they are following DevSecOps, where they're really testing those applications before they bring it live. Today, especially in banks, you've got a lot of API to API communication. How are you looking at that? Are you aware of what are the different APIs that are connecting to your environment? Right? Taking the inventories of all those APIs, making sure that you're following best practices, providing visibility of what those APIs are. I think those are some of the areas that using the concept of zero trust, we can really improve security of third-party connecting to your environments.
Thank you, Yuvraj. Mr. Sushil, Yuvraj spoke about the banking industry and the API integration and the flux of that. In your industry as well, including international operations, you see a lot of dependency on such third-party partners, including digital certificates and other areas. Has your industry observed any particular pertinent challenges in integrating zero trust framework with the overall ecosystem, both within the country or internationally?
In our organization, we have started this implementing this zero trust since last 2-3 years very aggressively, because our organization is having multiple subsidiaries and our offices are having all across the globe, and we have our various OT systems also. The manpower is very thin, so we have to implement zero trust considering that the employees of the organization, the third party vendor persons who are doing these mundane things, and our consignment stockists are also there who are selling our products. So all those things we have to consider, and on that basis we have implemented zero trust in such a manner that we have identified certain critical applications and certain are non-critical applications. So in the case of critical applications, we allow access from the outside of our network only through VPN, and in case the particular user is not having VPN, then he will not be able to be allowed the access. So even if he somehow manage the password and he does not have the VPN connectivity, he will not be able to connect to our system. Second part is that we have implemented in such a way that on various desktop PCs endpoints, there are certain prerequisite requirements we have identified that from that, in case a particular person has to work from a PC or a laptop, that he should meet certain prerequisites like antivirus, patch level, and some other things. In case that PC or laptop is not meeting that requirement, that is automatically gets connected to, disconnected from our network, so that that network cannot connect to our system. Third part for the zero trust we have implemented is that our central SCADA system we have totally isolated from IT, and only at a place where the data transfer etc. is required, that is being done by putting firewall at both places. And as regarding these OT system is totally kept independent, and those OT systems, other than the SCADA, they are not connected to IT. Only few things are connected to IT, which are the requirement, mandatory requirement from the government of India. So that way we are trying to minimize the risk to our infrastructure. Thank you.
So, Neha, Yuvraj and Sushil spoke about, API security, VPN implementation, things like that. From a continuous monitoring perspective, it's it's one thing about implementing a solution and monitoring it on a regular basis. But how can organization ensure continuous authentication from a zero trust principle? What should organizations do to ensure that there is always a visibility, you always know what is happening in the environment?
So I think context-aware authentication and authorization would be the way to go, because if you continuously verify somewhere, you are compromising the user experience and agility as well. So there has to be a balance. When you build context-aware security, basis certain parameters, a user may not need to fulfill the authentication requirements again and again. Having said that, there could be a set of legacy applications in the organization which may not be enabled to implement controls around MFA or context aware parameters you want to build in. So for that, I think there has to be a specific approach how to get that also into the gamut of this monitoring. But I think adaptive authentication is one way one could go forward for trying to minimize the impact on agility as well as user experience for the implementation of overall zero trust. And as I said, I think it was also mentioned earlier in the discussion, zero trust has different elements to it. So you may not want to pick up all elements together. It can be a phased approach. You pick up identity first, then you go with applications, data or endpoints. It could be a structured and phased approach, specifically when you're dealing with certain systems which are still evolving, be it the IoT side or systems which have inherent limitations on the OT side.
Raj, would you like to add to what are the adaptive authentication models and methods you would recommend to organizations to adopt?
Yeah, so I think from adaptive authentication, what we're looking at is you got to be first aware of where the particular user is coming from. So I think understanding the device, for example, whether the device is a company-owned device or whether it's a personal device. So that's very important. So understanding that once if it's coming from a company-owned device, so maybe what happens is you don't have just one single form of authentication, maybe just a password, right? But if it's coming from, let's say, a personal laptop, then you add one more or maybe two more. For example, it could be a biometric kind of authentication, or it could be a passcode kind of authentication. That is one aspect. The second aspect is around location, whether it's coming from a particular location in terms of office, or it's coming from a different geo, what time is he trying to connect from. So those are some of the aspects that you got to look at. And then one additional could be around IP, whether it's coming from an IP that it's a known IP or it's a malicious IP, then you can add a lot of additional complexity around that.
Okay. So we've been talking about zero trust, we've been talking about PKI. Fundamentally, at the base of every security solution or IT solution, we've had some form of cryptography, right, at end of the day. With the advent of quantum computing, there is a challenge. There is a prediction that all of this would need to be re-engineered, realigned. So, Rahul, what do you see quantum computing, to look like when it comes to challenging cryptography, cryptography at its base? Do you foresee some particular vulnerabilities that quantum computing would bring about, and how would industry shape up with it?
Yeah. So, PQC is a very interesting topic, right? And let me just, since we have some time, let me just try to cover like the very basics. I don't mean to scare everybody, but we all know, that, quantum computing works on qubits, right? And I mean, does anybody in the audience know how much time or how many qubits it takes to crack a 1024 RSA encryption, right? I mean, it takes, I'll answer that. It takes about, 20 million qubits, and, it'll take 8 hours to crack one RSA 24-bit, encryption. And while you may think that 20 million is a big number, right? And when are we going to get to that stage where, those level of computers or machines will be available? On 4th of December, IBM just announced that, they have a commercially, not commercially available, but in testing, a quantum chip that supports 1,000 qubits, right? And now if you apply Moore's law, and that's been like, several years back, but, things are really going to change very suddenly at some point, right? And, having said that, what can organizations really do today, to, be, PQC, I would say, ready, right? So the first thing is basically, having an inventory of where all the cryptography is, right? And we use cryptography for so many things in organizations, right from, SSL certificates to code signing, right? To file or, so, first of all, have an inventory of where all the cryptography is, which in itself is a huge, huge task, right? And the second thing is, have the right level of information in terms of, tagging, what is the cryptography algorithms that you are using, for what purpose is that cryptography, what are the, whether it is a short-lived certificate or a long-lived certificate. So based on all these parameters, try to form your prioritization, right? Now, once that is done, the second thing is to be crypto agile, right? So, and then what that basically means is you have the right level of automation, available, and, when you combine it with, the priority that is available in the inventory, you are able to very quickly swap, all those, cryptos with, PQC compliant cryptos, right? And, our organization is working very closely with, especially in the US, the government authorities, the NIST, in terms of formalizing the, PQC compliant cryptos, which you will see coming out very soon, next year in February, right? And, if you have these solutions in place, at least, the organizations are prepared to respond to it, right, when that situation arises.
Side and, your organization also fundamentally provide zero trust, firewalls and all of that, again, which fundamentally has cryptography as the base of the solution. How is your organization, your sector coping up or aligning to, the advent of quantum computing, and what are some of the structural changes that you foresee at the product level itself?
Yeah, I think, I think the most important thing around cryptography is, I think we need to have visibility, right? So having visibility of, because I think one of the biggest challenge today with most organizations is that what adversaries are doing, even today, when the quantum computing is about 5 to 10 years away, but attackers are looking at your crown jewels and trying to figure out if I can take that even in an encrypted format, and maybe when the quantum computing is there to decrypt, I can then try to decrypt the data, right? That's what the thought process is. So I think it's important for us as an organization, especially being a product company, to understand the visibility of where all those cryptographic keys are within the environment, and making sure that we're protecting that, right? In terms of being, as Rahul mentioned, right? Today we've got a NIST coming up with new algorithms to protect that. So are we able to use that, those algorithms to protect those keys is something that we're looking at. And from a vendor perspective, trying to make sure that we are relevant and making sure we adopt the latest technologies that are available in the market today to secure those keys.
Neha and Sushil, this is the product side of how, they're evolving or they're looking at developing, the next phase of solutions. As a client, as a servicing organization, how do you think quantum computing can impact what the operations of the organizations that we represent, or any sector that you feel would get impacted first?
See, I think I'll not answer sector specific, but what I can say is that the impact, if it impacts the PKI's current ability, so that is the impact on all the sectors, because the inherent part of communication across has been PKI. So it's not a sector specific thing, it would be multiple sectors impacted, and wherever the trust, and trust is a key component of all communications, even if whatever we talk of nowadays. So as of now, we do not know where it is headed towards, but yes, the implications could be very severe.
In our organization, like various organizations are implementing the e-notes. The proposals are moved from the physical mode to the e-mode. And other things like the procurement, etc. is done. Like there is a NIC portal is there and GEM portal is there. So now presently we are implementing the e-note sheet, and the verification is from the username and password. And slowly we will move this verification from the this username password to the digital certification, so that in case the username password is stolen by somebody, so then digital signature is more secure as compared to the username and password. Third part, what we are thinking of is that once we are going from, presently we are in having the in-house SAP systems. We are trying to migrate to HANA, and we are trying to go into the cloud. So the cloud security we will emphasizing on, and it will further improve our system. Thank you.
We have a few minutes left, and probably I'll come to the most hot topic of the season, generative AI, right? You pick up any newspaper, any article, you'll see something or the other of generative AI. Whether it is the deep fakes that we are seeing right from the Pentagon story to others, or I was reading an article yesterday or today talking about how our Jamtara, very own Jamtara, has started talking about, impacting voice and cloning voices to get into the front. How is a product company like yours using generative AI solutions to design, come up with solutions for the future?
Yeah, so what we are focusing on, basically in this, with, like you mentioned, all the deep fakes. So what we are focusing on is how do we establish content trust, right? And if you look at any content that is created from an end user device or in any way, right? And the person who creates the content to the life cycle it goes through to somebody who has edited the content, right? And they may use different tools for editing the content. So what we are focusing on is how we are able to create certificates that track who has made the changes to the content from the time of its origination to the time that somebody views it, right? And I think that is a very important area that basically covers the trust overall. And Gen AI is really playing an element into it, right? So I think content trust and focusing on technologies that establish content trust has become even more important overall.
Yuvraj, would you like to add how is your organization?
As an organization, we've been in existence for 30. Yeah. So as an organization, we've been in existence for more. So we've been doing AI ML for about 30 years, right? Where we've talked about predictive ML, where we're able to detect things like phishing attacks, threat detection around endpoints, and so on. Now with generative AI, we are working on a few use cases, especially around customer support, right? For example, today, if there's a user who are using our products, if they want to know certain things, right? So how do we really assist them in finding those, instead of going to Google and finding a knowledge base article, within the console itself, how can we help the customer find about that particular query that he has? How do we really help? For example, let's say we've got hundreds and hundreds of firewalls deployed across the environment. Today, most of the updates of firmware is normally done manually, right? So how do we really help our customers automate those migrations of firmware from the previous version to the latest version? Some of the work that we're doing under generative AI.
Neha or Sushil, as a user organization, any particular use cases that you would like to share of how your organization or your sector is looking at using generative AI? Not necessarily around zero trust, but in general as well.
What we are thinking of is like authentication for the our system, critical SAP system, through this digital signature, so that for critical users, so that in case their password etc. is compromised, even then their nobody can be able to use their SAP, because say there are many users. For all users it may not be possible. For few users we are thinking of and we are exploring it.
So I think one specific example I can easily give is on enhancement of the user experience on the product side. So if one has to search through a customer manual for certain instructions, so that is a clear case of where, these kind of technologies, we already have something functional wherein, the customer doesn't have to really struggle for finding out a solution through a manual, and that is the first, I think, primary use case of adoption from one of our key marketing related applications, which is directly consumer facing. So that is one example wherein, other than beyond security I'm talking about, is a directly implication for the consumer side of things.
So we are more or less done with the time. Probably we could ask the audience if they have any questions.
This question is for Rahul. You said that the new NIST or standards will come in February next year. Do you mean the coming February or it is 25?
So there is a draft with 4, cryptography, PQC approved cryptos that are available. The further list is going to come out in February, right? And basically the current, cryptographic standards are focusing on KEM. It is focusing on, digital signatures. So there's another extended list that's going to come out, this February, which is, next 2 months. Yeah.
Hi. So this question is to the entire panel. So there are a lot of vendors that are claiming to do zero trust on an agentless basis versus some do on an agent basis. So just curious to know your thoughts, like what is the right way to do, or you can do it either way.
Yeah, like I said, so zero trust first of all, it's really, it's not a technology, right? It's a framework, right? And I think it really depends on what is the use case for zero trust you're trying to pick up, right? Like she was mentioning that you either pick up devices or, apps, or, you just start with, one use case at a time, and then you use that, technology. And of course, if you look at IoT, for example, right, you really don't have much, they are really memory constrained devices at the edge. So you can't really be putting, agents which are performing or consuming high entropy, for example, because they don't have, that kind of compute available. So it really depends on the use case, and, you really make the judgment on, which part of the solution you are trying to implement and address. I don't know, that's a very generic answer, but...
No, Okta claimed that they are zero trust. So
yeah.
I was curious. That's why they just had a breach.
So, what approach do you take would be really dependent on what. So, if you ask me, if it depends on the end system or the end protocol that you're looking at. For endpoint systems, for users whom you really want to trust for access to sensitive critical systems, probably you may want to go with an endpoint because that gives you more telemetry, more granular telemetry. But then there are systems, operating systems, other kind of ecosystems where implementation of the endpoint itself is not possible, where you would need to go and agentless solution per se. So it would really depend on what is the use case and what is the sensitivity or the access that you are trying to restrict and monitor. Yeah, with that, I think we are. Any other questions? Otherwise, we are done with the time. Thank you so much to the audience, to the questions that we had, and thank you to each and every panel member for the vast experience that they were able to share with the entire audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Request Kriti, alumni of Cybersecurity program, to hand over a memento to the panelists.